How did neighbors become killers? How did a nation turn on itself, leading to one of the most brutal genocides in modern history? To understand the horror of Rwanda in 1994, we have to go back in time. Long before the world watched in shock, the seeds of this tragedy were deliberately planted. This is the story of how colonial ambition created a divide that would one day tear a country apart. Rwanda wasn't always a land of division. Before Europeans arrived, it was a united kingdom ruled by a king, the Mwami. Society was built on class, not ethnicity. The Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa people lived together, spoke the same language, Kinyarwanda, and even intermarried. Your identity wasn't set in stone. If a Hutu became wealthy and owned many cattle, they could become a Tutsi. If a Tutsi lost their wealth, they might become a Hutu. The lines were fluid. It was one kingdom, one people. The deep, hateful ethnic divide we know today simply didn't exist. Then everything changed. After the Berlin Conference carved up Africa, Rwanda first fell under German rule, and then Belgian rule after World War I. The Belgians brought with them a dangerous obsession, racial science. They measured skulls and noses, creating a false hierarchy. They decided the Tutsi minority, who were often cattle herders, were a superior, almost European-like ruling class. The Hutu majority, mostly farmers, were deemed inferior. This wasn't just an idea, it became state policy. In 1933, the Belgians issued identity cards, permanently stamping Hutu or Tutsi on every citizen. They educated the Tutsis, gave them positions of power, and systematically marginalized the Hutu. This colonial strategy, divide and rule, wasn't just an administrative choice. It manufactured hatred where there was none, creating a legacy of resentment that would fester for decades. By the late 1950s, the winds of change were blowing across Africa. Independence was on the horizon, but in Rwanda, it brought more conflict, not unity. The oppressed Hutu majority, fueled by decades of colonial injustice, rose up in what's known as the Hutu Revolution. Starting in 1959, violent uprisings targeted the Tutsi elite who had been propped up by the Belgians. Thousands of Tutsis were killed, and over 100,000 were forced to flee to neighboring countries like Uganda and Burundi. When Rwanda gained independence in 1962, a Hutu, Gregor Kayibanda, became president. But instead of healing the nation, the new government flipped the script of oppression. It institutionalized anti-Tutsi discrimination, using the very same divisive logic the Belgians had introduced. The cycle of hatred built by colonial hands was now set to spin on its own. The next couple of decades saw this division deepen. In 1973, another Hutu, General Juvenal Habyarimana, seized power. His regime doubled down on an ideology of Hutu power, systematically pushing Tutsis out of the army, government, and universities. All this time, the Tutsi refugees who had fled in the 50s and 60s were not sitting idle. In Uganda, they formed the Rwandan Patriotic Front, or RPF, a disciplined rebel army led by figures like Paul Kagame. In October 1990, the RPF invaded northern Rwanda, demanding the right to return and an end to the discriminatory government. This started a brutal civil war. For Habyarimana's extremist government, the invasion was the perfect excuse. They ramped up their propaganda, painting all Tutsis inside Rwanda men, women, and children as spies and traitors, calling them enemy collaborators. The groundwork for genocide was being laid, piece by terrifying piece. How do you convince ordinary people to commit mass murder? You poison their minds. From 1990 to 1994, a powerful propaganda machine went into overdrive. A popular radio station, RTLM, broadcast hate 24/7, day and night. Its charismatic announcers spewed venom, calling Tutsis Inyenzi cockroaches that needed to be crushed. The extremist magazine Kangura published lists of enemies. It wasn't just talk. The government was actively training and arming Hutu militias, the most infamous being the Interahamwe. These were ordinary young men turned into killing squads. At the same time, international pressure led to peace talks in Arusha, Tanzania. These talks resulted in the Arusha Accords, a power-sharing agreement that would have included the RPF in the government. But for the Hutu extremists who held power, sharing it was unthinkable. They saw the peace deal not as a solution, but as a betrayal. The population was now primed. The weapons were distributed. All they needed was a spark. That spark came on the evening of April 6, 1994. The plane carrying President Habyarimana and the President of Burundi was shot down as it prepared to land in Kigali. Both were killed. To this day, it's debated who was responsible, but it doesn't really matter. For the extremists, this was the signal they had been waiting for. Within hours, the carefully prepared plan was unleashed. Presidential guards set up roadblocks across the capital. Lists of Tutsi and moderate Hutu politicians were handed out, and the assassinations began. This wasn't a spontaneous eruption of anger. It was the start of a meticulously planned genocide. What followed was 100 days of unimaginable horror. From April to July 1994, at least 800,000 people, the vast majority of them Tutsis, but also moderate Hutus who refused to participate, were systematically slaughtered. This wasn't a war fought on a battlefield. This was neighbors killing neighbors with machetes. People were hunted down in their homes, in schools, and even in churches where they sought refuge. The killings were organized by government officials, with the army, the police, and the Interahamwe militias leading the charge, often broadcasting locations of hiding Tutsis over the radio. And where was the world? The small UN peacekeeping force, led by Canadian General Romeo Dallaire, pleaded for a stronger mandate to intervene, but their requests were denied. The UN ordered them to stand down and only observe. Western nations, including the US, France, and Belgium, evacuated their own citizens and then pulled out, deliberately avoiding the word genocide because acknowledging it would have legally obligated them to act. The world knew, the world watched, and the world did nothing. The genocide was not stopped by international intervention. It was ended by force. The RPF, led by Paul Kagame, broke the ceasefire and launched a full-scale offensive from the north. They fought their way across the country, battling the genocidal government's forces. In July 1994, they captured the capital, Kigali, effectively ending the slaughter. As the RPF advanced, the genocidal regime collapsed and its leaders fled to neighboring Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo. They took with them over 2 million Hutu refugees, some fleeing the RPF, others forced to go by the defeated Hutu power leaders. This massive refugee crisis destabilized the entire region, leading directly to 2 devastating wars in the Congo. The genocide was over, but its aftermath would ripple across Central Africa for years to come. How does a country even begin to heal from such a wound? Rwanda faced an impossible task. The nation was destroyed, its people traumatized. Justice was the first step. The UN established the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda to prosecute the masterminds of the genocide. But with hundreds of thousands of perpetrators, the formal court system was overwhelmed. So Rwanda turned to a traditional justice system called Gakaka. These were community courts where villagers came together to hear confessions and determine guilt for lower-level killers. It was a flawed but necessary process for truth and reconciliation. To forge a new national identity, the new government led by the RPF made a radical decision. They officially banned the ethnic labels of Hutu and Tutsi. Today, everyone is simply Rwandan. While the country has made incredible economic progress, the scars remain. The trauma is passed down through generations, and the debate over what truly happened continues. The Rwandan Genocide is a dark stain on human history, but it holds a powerful lesson. It stands as the ultimate symbol of international failure, of the catastrophic cost of indifference. The world's silence in 1994 led directly to the creation of the responsibility to protect at the UN, the principle that the international community must intervene to stop mass atrocities. But the most important lesson goes back to the beginning. The genocide wasn't an ancient tribal conflict. It was a modern crime born from a colonial ideology that twisted identity into a weapon. It showed us how propaganda can dehumanize an entire group of people and how political leaders can exploit fear to achieve monstrous goals. The story of Rwanda is a tragic reminder that the lines that divide us are often drawn by those who seek power, and that it is up to all of us to refuse to see each other as anything less than human. Thank you so much for watching. This is a heavy but incredibly important topic, and understanding it is crucial. If you found this video informative, please give it a like and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.